Welcome, everyone, to Our Whole Lives Taking Flight. Today, our topic is trans action. My name is Reverend Amy Johnson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Minister for Sexuality, Education, and Justice in the United Church of Christ. I'd like to welcome you this morning to this joint webinar with our UUA siblings in faith. With me today are a panel of folks, and I would like to start out by tossing it over to my sister in all things Our Whole Lives, Dr. Melanie Davis.
How is everybody today? I hope you are well. I am Dr. Melanie Davis. I am the UUA's OWL Program Manager. Reverend Yadi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Yadi Martinez-Reyna, and I am a pastor at First UCC and Second Life. I'm also the founder of Color Splash Out, a nonprofit dedicated to creating safe and brave spaces for LGBTQ youth and their ally friends. And I'll toss it to Adrian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian Blue, they, them pronouns. I'm the LGBTQ and Gender Justice Programs Coordinator at the Unitarian Universalist Association, where I support trans and non-binary and larger LGBTQA plus ministries for UUs. And I will pass it to Rachel.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, I'm Rachael. They, them, queer, trans, non-binary sibling. I am the team lead and minister for gender and sexuality justice ministries, and I work with Amy and a lot of other wonderful people in partnership with the UUA for this beautiful curriculum that we offer. And essentially what we do at Gender, Sexuality, and Justice Ministries for the UCC is anything that is at the intersection of sexuality and gender. We are actively involving ourselves in creating space and transformative justice initiatives, especially in this moment. So I'm grateful to be here this morning. And Reverend Ashley, I'd love to invite you.
Thank you, Rachel. Reverend Ashley Horan, she, her pronouns, talking to you from Dakota and Anishinaabe lands here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I serve as the Organizing Strategy Director at the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is a lot of fancy words for saying I hold the team that does the outward-facing justice work of our association, including our under the umbrella of Side with Love and our for intersectional justice campaigns. I'm delighted to be here with all of you.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for saying yes this morning and this afternoon, wherever you are in the country or the world. We welcome you here. And thank you so much to the panelists. I want to give a little bit of logistical and contextual information to folks this morning. First of all, this webinar, though the United Church of Christ does host the webinar platform, is a joint offering between the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ. And we also have this publicized publicly. So sometimes people who are on these webinars are either members of UCC or UUA congregations, or maybe they're not of either one. And they may or may not, you may or may not be familiar with Our Whole Lives. So we ask that if you have any questions in general about the program, what Our Whole Lives is about, what we do or don't believe, what we do or don't teach, we ask you to kind of hold those questions and send them to me or Melanie Davis outside of this webinar platform so that we can focus on our topic today. And the best way to reach either of us is a very simple email address, either owl@uua.org or owl@ucc.org, and those will get to us if you have questions about the program. You know, especially when we have challenging topics, it's important for us to kind of keep on our topic and also to be respectful of the breadth of our audience and the differing faith beliefs that may be present here today. If you do have questions about the topics that we're discussing, or if there's something in particular you would like us to address, we ask that you please use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen next to the chat. I know that our wonderful tech person, Laura, has put in a question in the chat to have you all let us know where you're from. It's really hard for us to manage all the questions that come up if they're in the chat. It's really easy for us to manage those if they're in the Q&A. So we ask that you please use the Q&A feature for any questions that you have today. So I'm seeing that we've got folks from all over the country chiming in today and are working are here today from lots of different places, and we welcome you and we're glad you're here. And we also do record these, so they are available on a playlist later, which we'll say more about at the end. So without further ado, I just want us to kind of I know in our intros, you all said a little bit about what you're doing, but this is a particular moment in our history, in the United States in particular, around trans and non-binary beloved, and rights and legislation that is being really trying to legislate people out of existence, is what I would say. And so we are wanting to lift up our voices, and in particular our faith voices, and to let you all know some things that our faith traditions are doing in particular to be supportive, faith-based voices for our beloved siblings. So I asked a couple of people that I know, and Melanie asked a couple of people that she knows in our faith traditions that do some of this work. So I'd really like to give time and space and voice to them. Let's just dive in. Let's start. Rachael, would you be willing to start us off and let us know some stuff the UCC is working on?
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Before I do that, I want to say that this is a really hard moment that we're in. And if it feels heavy to you, trust that you are not alone in that feeling heavy, and that it requires of us to be resilient in a new way, maybe for the first time for some of us, maybe not the first time for some queer folks, but maybe for the first time for some of our allies and co-conspirators. So I want to encourage you, if you are questioning how to be involved in this moment, that we are here to respond and be in dialogue with you and to help resource that. And I want to say specifically to my trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming siblings, you are so, 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 so loved. And you were created uniquely and wonderfully made with gifts that only you can bless this world with. And we are doing everything we possibly can to ensure that you have space within our churches and within our faith communities. And I am holding you personally, knowing what that feels like as a trans and non-binary person. We see you, we love you, we do more than affirm you, we fight for you. So I want to say that first. Then I want to say that we do have a campaign that we're rolling out at what we call at the United Church of Christ our General Synod, which is our big meeting where we all come together as a happy family from diverse backgrounds that come together to have a meeting and see each other. It's our first time having Synod in 4 years, so it'll be a reunion of sorts. But at Synod, we'll be launching a campaign called Loving Louder, Love Your Neighbor Out Loud. And it's a call and commitment and a covenant that we're hoping that we can make together in the year ahead, where we dare to love out loud in our action and our dialogues and our conversations with our resources as we can, and take care of our queer siblings. This campaign will be around a t-shirt that we are going to sell through UCC resources. And 100% of those profits from those shirts will go to a special fund that's earmarked for 2024, which is our election year, right? I don't know about you, but I already feel things in my body about the election year coming up. It's going to continue to be a little hard. So we want to make sure that this special fund is set aside for our trans youth and adults who may need support, whether that's to have funds to deal with healthcare initiatives, funds to take care of housing. We're really trying to look for ways that we can be holistic and taking care of those being pressured immensely so on the margin. So that's something that we're looking at as a tangible way. And a part of this campaign will also look at the fall being a soft launch of a new way that we're going to hold containers of taking care of our queer siblings. So we'll be having online Zoom sessions that will be group Zoom sessions that will be held for Black and Brown folk, for trans and non-binary folk, for queer folk, to have care, because care is really essential during this time. So we're working on facilitating that with folks and bringing in partners to host that, and then having advocacy 101 webinars on gender and sexuality monthly to keep people abreast of what's going on and to let people know how they might be able to engage. So we're really trying to look across the board at how can we proactively respond to this moment, not react, but be proactive in ensuring that we are engaging in transformative justice, justice that is actively centering liberation and embodying what I like to talk about as it's a practice to get free. So how can we offer practices of freedom together virtually and in hybrid spaces and in in-person spaces? We want to be as accessible as possible because these are scary times, and we do not want you to feel alone or be alone in that. We want to hold each other in that, and we want to engage and give you the resources and tools you need to make decisions about how you want to do justice where you are on the ground. So those are some tangible things that are moving and that we're really excited about. So those shirts, the Loving Louder shirts, will come online at the end of June for people to purchase. And we'll make sure that you have the link for that when that goes live. But we're really excited and proud to be able to back up what we say we are doing, which is an active question, I think, in justice work that we should ask. Are we doing what we say we are going to do? And are we doing it faithfully? And I am grateful for all these individuals on the screen because I know we're working really hard every day to answer that question. So that's how I'll begin sharing from our perspective. But I would love to interweave between UCC and UUA and maybe invite Reverend Ashley and Adrian to speak on your end. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. It's so wonderful to hear about all the things you all are up to. And knowing that there's so many people of faith who are out here doing this work across the country from so many different traditions. And I get on the soapbox all the time, but for the last 40 years, progressive religious folks have really ceded that public moral values conversation to the radical religious right. And I take so much hope in seeing us begin to reclaim that with boldness and bravery and insistence that no, you don't actually get to speak for God on our behalf. So glad to be in that work with you all. As I said earlier, Ashley Horan, I am the organizing strategy director at the UUA. And under the banner of our Side with Love campaign, we work on a number of different issues that include climate justice, decriminalization, democracy and voting rights, and LGBTQ gender and reproductive justice, that bodily autonomy work under the campaign that we call Uplift Action. And so that's what I'm here to talk about today a little bit. We are currently, doing a ton of work across the country in partnership with a number of trans-led grassroots organizations that are working to help trans folks in states where these 500 plus deadly bills have been passed or moving through legislatures in this past year. I want to just say I'm not going to name partners out loud right now because of the very real security concerns that exist. So we have very serious agreements around security and not speaking publicly, especially because the online, doxing and attacks can be so intense for our beloveds. But what I can talk about is that I feel really lucky that we have built over the last number of years a deep organizing infrastructure across the country. We've done that through our UU the Vote campaign that's mobilized folks around electoral issues. We've done it in partnership with our state action networks, which are the state-based UU social justice organizations that are bringing people together in a state-based way to do legislative advocacy, grassroots organizing, that sort of thing. So right now what the work looks like is, our partners have given us lists of cities across the country where people are either traveling through or landing to relocate. or to access gender care that's no longer available where they live. And we're doing things like reaching out to our community and organizing homestays for people. We're inviting folks to contribute home hospitality, resources, money in some cases to support people getting where they need to be. We're also providing spiritual sustenance and support directly to trans religious professionals and members in our congregations across the country who are staying where they are for any number of reasons, even when those places are no longer safe for them and their families. So we're doing a lot of national coordinating that is also very hyper local, so we'll get a call being like, we need somebody in Helena, Montana for next Tuesday night to open their home to 2 adults, 3 kids, and a dog, and so it gets very specific sometimes, but we also recognize that building out that infrastructure is actually helping us deepen relationship nationwide. And when the government won't keep us safe, which it hasn't kept many of our communities safe for generations, we keep each other safe. And so we're about the work right now of helping folks deepen into those relationships that will get our people what they need. I'll also just add on to that, we continue to also do electoral work, as I mentioned, through our UU the Vote campaign. We are helping to give people a really deep theological lens around bodily autonomy, not just trans issues, not just abortion issues, but really all of the things that bring those together, and to help people understand that we're talking about theological anthropology of belovedness, right? We're talking about human agency and free will. We're talking about, inescapable love of the divine and us all being created in the image of the divine. So we're trying to help people get that frame as well. And finally, I will say that we are, we're trying to respond as best we can as things come up. So for example, we have any number of congregations across the country that are struggling right now as we head into Pride Month because they're hosting a drag brunch or because they have a trans affirming slogan on their wayside pulpit, because their presence online. White Christian nationalists are showing up outside of our congregations with machine guns. Sometimes they're doxing people on the internet. They're doing any number of really harmful and awful things. And so recently we've been working to help our congregations prepare for those kinds of interactions, while not letting the tactic of fear that the right is using so effectively right now keep us from being vocal and public. So last week we ran a webinar. I'll stick the link in the chat in a minute here, but that was just for congregations about how to think about security and safety for folks, also with an abolitionist lens, so that we know that safety is coming from our people and not from the police and prisons. And we're just trying to support people where they are to show up loud, proud, faithful, and deeply open. So that's kind of the outward facing work. I'll turn it to my colleague, Adrian, to talk about some of the work we're doing with our own many trans and queer UU folk.
Hey, thank you so much, Ashley. And before you pop in, Adrian, I just wanted to say a couple things before I lose a thread. One is that you mentioned your UU the Vote, and I just wanted to mention that we do in the UCC also have a voting campaigns called Our Faith, Our Vote. And so that will be ramping up as we move into 2024. And then the other thing that I just wanted to say is that we are recording this webinar. And so please do not record it personally. We are recording it and it will be available to you with a link that we'll put in the chat later on in the webinar. So please do not personally record the webinar. Okay, over to you, Adrian.
Hey everybody, this is Adrian again. And as a reminder, I'm the LGBTQ and Gender Justice Programs Coordinator at our Unitarian Universalist Association. Reverend Ashley works in the organizing strategy team and Side with Love at the UUA. And I work in a closely aligned department that focuses more on inward-facing ministries within UUism. It's the Office of LGBTQ and Multicultural Ministries. And my role there is holding UU internally focused ministries for LGBTQIA plus folks. And we have a whole bunch of different programs. I work with Reverend Michael Crumpler on our Welcoming Renewal programming, which is, we have a Welcoming Congregations program around supporting LGBTQIA plus presence in congregations. And it was created a few decades ago. And so we have created sort of a refresher a few years ago to help folks bring their congregations in line with current needs around LGBTQIA plus communities. So we have programming around this. We're working right now actually on adjusting and adapting that programming into our very current moment, and providing additional support and resources for congregations in these times. I started the Uplift Trans Non-Binary Plus monthly gatherings, which is a multi-generational all ages space for trans and non-binary UUs and friends. Anybody who's in UCC who wants to come, y'all are welcome to come. Just, it'll be a UU space, so you'll have to tolerate that. But there are lots of non-UUs who come all the time. And it's a monthly space where people have the chance to have some spiritual time and reflection, have a chance to have sort of small group connections in ministry. There's time to play games, listen to music, sing songs together, and share sacred words or poetry from trans and non-binary UU leaders, as well as trans and non-binary folks from all over. We try to keep most of our content trans and non-binary specific, from musicians to words and art. So that program's been running for 3 years. This is at the end of our 3rd church year, and it's been a really lovely space to keep on growing and expanding. We recently, a few months ago, added an additional program in collaboration with Trust, which is our UU religious professionals organization for trans and non-binary folks. And that program is a pastoral care group space. So now, in addition to our monthly gathering community space, we have a space for folks to receive emotional and spiritual care in a community setting, with chaplains available. And it's a space to kind of go in deeper and talk about the hard stuff, which we try to keep our worship and community space a space where people aren't asked to hold each other's trauma. And this is a space where that is an explicit thing that will happen, and we're supporting each other through. So those are our 2 trans and non-binary focused programs that are available right now. As I'm sure many folks know, there are so many things our communities need, and we're continuing to dream and build, and hope for us to be able to provide more support for everyone's needs as time goes on. So those are some of our programs. What else? We also are doing a lot of programming during our version of Senate General Assembly. I'm not sure how exactly the same it is, but I think it's somewhat similar, and offering additional extended programming focused on trans families. And over the past few months, as needs have been shifting across the UUA and across our congregations, we've been building deeper collaborations with departments all over the UUA and are working on developing programming with the kinds of things that they offer as well. I can't speak publicly about those things yet because it's not finalized, but I'm really excited about the ways that we're interweaving our work and building sort of an internal coalition to support folks. Because the awesome thing about our UUA, and I imagine this is true somewhat for the UCC as well, is we actually have a lot of tools already in place to support folks. And we can direct some of those tools towards the trans and non-binary community in a more focused way than we have in the past. So I'm excited for how those things will evolve. And if you're confused about the different kinds of work that Ashley and I are holding, Ashley does Uplift Action, I do Uplift Ministries. Uplift is a framing and brand that the Reverend Michael Crumpler created a few years ago when he started in the role, to hold all of the queer things. Yeah, and I just wanted to add that the tagline of Uplift Action is because every body is sacred. And I just wanted you to know that tagline. So thank y'all for listening about this work. There's going to be some resources in the chat. Maybe they already are, they're going to be later. Please feel free to check them out. There's a number of different things that are helpful trans kinds of stuff to focus on and gather.
Thank you, Adrian. Before we move on, I want to remind people that if when you registered for today's webinar, if you clicked that you would accept email from the UCC, then you will get a follow-up with not only a link to this webinar, but also all the links that are generated in today's chat will be in that newsletter. If for some reason you chose not to click the I'll get the email, you can email Amy at owl@ucc.org. That's owl@ucc.org. And just let Amy know that you would indeed like those resources.
Yeah, and I'll also, before we go to you, Yadi, I'll also talk about how you can find those on our YouTube playlist at the end of this webinar. And now, without further ado, the one and only Yadi.
Wow, thank you. So my organization is called Color Splash Out, and it started just as a summer camp in Texas last year in New Braunfels, that we were just gonna do a quick summer camp, and I got seminary friends to join me and coaxed them into coming with me, and we had 20 LGBTQ plus kids. And so after that, we realized that there is such a need for these spaces that we became a nonprofit. And so this is our second year. This time we are in Lake Texoma, and we have 32 teens signed up. And so our mission is to create safe and brave spaces for LGBTQ youth and their ally friends. And the reason we are so into the ally friends as well is that there are LGBTQ youth that are struggling and their friends don't know what to do about it. And sometimes some of these teens are not out at church or at home or their friends. And so they'll say, I'm going to support my friend. And so then they come out, or they'll work through it, or they'll just keep it in their mind that they're beloved, that they're sacred, and then there's a space for them. And so that's why we decided we were going to do this, LGBTQ plus and their ally friends. And not only that, but I believe that as they grow older, they also have that framework that they're part of a community, even if they're not queer themselves. We're all in this together, in this struggle, in la lucha, in the struggle together. And so, yeah, we're excited about this. And so we started as just summer camps, but after this summer camp, we are finding ways to go national, to go into different areas that would invite us and have us and host us. And so we can bring our programming. We have 6 components that we've created for this, and that's an intentional safe and brave space. So it doesn't sound like a big deal for some, but the name and given the young people the ability to write their name after their parent leaves, it's been huge. We also asked them what house they want to be in. We don't call them cabins, we call them houses, sort of to play on the 80s sort of ball, theme stuff. So we call them houses. We have house leaders, we have co-creators as the teams. And so they get to choose what house they belong to. So we'll ask, are you in the right house? And so they'll say, no, I belong with the guys, or no, I belong in the non-binary, or no, I belong with the, and so they will move their stuff. And so we'll do this shuffling at the beginning of camp. That is amazing. And so that's one of the major things about it, is like, we're so intentional about creating safe spaces. And then we have a variety extravaganza show. It's not a drag show. Nobody gets excited. Nobody's exchanging dollars. There is no sexuality, none of that stuff. It's a variety extravaganza show. It's a talent show for our young friends to, if they happen to dress up, they happen to dress up, right? And so Shakespeare did it, and we honor it. And so that's the way we go with it. And so that's like the hit at the end, that's like they worked towards that. And at the end, they have this huge show and they dress up, and somebody donated like 50 prom dresses and suits. And so we're going to put all that out there. And it's just amazing to see how they have this really fun, exciting summer camp experience. And then they have a really good party where we celebrate them. And then they also have workshops. So this year, our theme is about be connected, be compassionate, be you, be celebrated. And how are you compassionate when you're being bullied? How are you compassionate when legislation wants to like literally get rid of you? How? But what we see is that teens want to respond and want to react, and then they get in trouble. They get sent to the principal, they get thrown out of the schools, they get into the system of juvenile system that is not fair. So how can we give them tools for them to respond in a way that doesn't mess things up? Because life's not fair, but we're not going to sit and think about this. We're going to find ways to help the young people thrive. And that's the key word, wanting to thrive. And so that's one of the things, innovative ways of thinking, of bringing leaders and community folks to talk to them. And so that's why, as we think national, we want to go to all these places, but we want to connect with those churches and those places so that when we leave, we don't leave. We leave them connected with their home, their churches, their places. And so it's a goal. And every year I tell my team, one little camp at a time, let's pace ourselves because there's so much to do. And so our biggest thing is networking and connecting and finding ways to support other people's work already. So yeah, that's our thing, creating safe and brave spaces.
Yadi, that just is so wonderful and uplifting to hear about that camp. I'm curious is there a spiritual element or religious element to the Color Splash Out camp, or is it secular, or how does that work?
Yeah, we actually had to sit through the first camp on the way to the second camp as we became a nonprofit and thought about this. Do we want to be religious, secular? What do we want to do? Because a lot of our queer kids are afraid of coming into camp if they hear it's a Christian camp or if it's a spiritual camp. They're like, oh God, no, they're going to convert me. The worst things come to mind. And so during our discernment, we realized that the only way we were going to change that conversation was to just be. And so we're an interfaith camp. We have Buddhists, we invited people in the Jewish community, we invited people who are agnostic, even atheists, and we have a spiritual component to it, but that everybody has a way of contributing, and so that we can show them what being spiritual in whatever context that means looks like. And that way, if they are from a religious perspective and they want to be involved in it, they can without fearing that sometimes the kids only see the negative part of it. So how can we change that conversation in doing it? And so we have an amazing worship leader who is a non-binary, he's from a trans community, womanist, and they're just so amazing at all these blending of components and spirituality. And so when we do the earth, be connected to the earth and to community, the Buddhist takes over because they're just amazing with some of that stuff. And so we just sort of interlace into what that looks like.
That's wonderful. And I'm wondering if folks in our who are UUs who are listening might be wondering, the churches, the congregations that you're looking to connect with, are those predominantly UCC, or would you welcome other faith communities to also be connection points?
Yeah, we want to connect with everyone. We want to be able to go into these different communities out there because we are aware that some of these programming might not be accessible or available. So how can we support those communities and leave the teens connected, but also maybe even provide some of our resources or some of the way we do stuff as a way of also sort of doing inner training. We learn so much from the people we walk alongside, including the youngsters. So we're open.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Yadi, if you're willing to pop your email where people could contact you into the chat, that would be really helpful. I think Adrian and Ashley, if you haven't done that already, please also do that, and Rachel. And I'm so just full right now with all this beautiful sharing, and I hope that this is meaningful and helpful and inspiring to all of you who are watching today and anybody who might be watching afterward, because as Rachel was saying earlier, and I know we've all touched on this in one way or another, that we need to be really loud about our support right now and about what resources and what support mechanisms we have. So I hope that this is helpful for you. I would love to hear from any of you, since we are in Our Whole Lives Taking Flight webinar, how you see, and we've talked a lot about resources that y'all have, but how do you see this intersecting with Our Whole Lives? I mean, I'll just say up front, Our Whole Lives is not, while it is very affirming of, and that has been controversial in the past and continues to be, that is very affirming of LGBTQ identities and people as human beings with bodies and genders. It is not a quote unquote LGBTQ curriculum, right? So I would love to hear from any of you who would like to speak to how you see the work and the resources that we are lifting up today, how that intersects with Our Whole Lives and facilitation of the program and support of the program.
I'll jump right in before I forget what I was going to say. Our Whole Lives gives the language that is necessary sometimes to be able to educate others, but also to give the teens some words, okay? And for example, in Texas, the bill SB 14 passed this past June, which prohibits from all this, from teens to transition or transition-related care. And the words that were used, and the words being used to promote this bill, were words that Our Whole Lives would be like, that is not true. That is false rhetoric. That is fear mongering. That is wrong. So the words that were like chemical castration or mental identity abuse or social bullying, but in the worst, gender mutilation. And although Our Whole Lives might not be LGBTQ only, it does give the language, because our teens were able to say that, no, that's not the way it works. This is what I've learned. And so it also gave parents the language when dealing with this. So that's been my experience with Our Whole Lives.
I'll weave in that we've all spoken in a different way, in different ways, about the critical nature of right now, right? I was in a webinar a few days ago with the United Church of Christ Penn Central Conference, and we were talking about innovation in worship spaces. Just as much as this is a critical, scary moment, this is a fertile soil moment too. The church as a whole, no matter what faith dynamic we're looking at, whatever you call spiritual, it has the autonomy to bring the resource that in the national context, in the United States, where we're having 500 anti-LGBTI laws that have been placed before, 76 put into law, banning of books, all these things intersect over each other, right? The church still has the autonomy and the power of the people and its faith to offer critical resources that those who want us to be scared of our bodies, scared of our minds, and scared of our spirit, we can say no. We can say no. And the church can say, yes, you're welcome here. And here is Our Whole Life. And here is how we can comprehensively look at the body and the mind and the spirit in a healthy, loving, compassionate way. So if this is your first webinar that you've attended, or maybe many, and you've been curious about having Our Whole Lives in your congregational setting, reach out. Because in justice work, there's so much, right? You can get inundated. This can be your one thing, y'all, because it really is too much to pick a bunch. You can pick one thing. And this one thing that you're picking by bringing Our Whole Lives into your church space will save lives. Because right now, depending on where you are, our kiddos are getting inundated with information and rhetoric that their bodies are not beloved. And we know that's not right. We feel that like in our bone marrow, our guts, we know that's not right. And we have the power as the people, as people of faith, to bring something that is being stripped out of other spaces. And we can still hold that, and we can save lives by offering this curriculum and being in this dialogue. So I want to name that as we weave, and let my other colleagues speak. But that's the one thing. If there's one thing that you're looking for doing, this is the one thing that we can both help you with, from the UCC, UUA perspective, whoever you are. We can help you in integrating that into your one initiative that you might want to pick up. So I'll say that.
I'll hop in. That was really powerful, Rachel. And I think it really speaks to what OWL can bring and be for congregations and for youth all over the country and outside the US too, where it is. Shout out to folks in Canada who use the program, and in other places too. So yeah, I mean, yes, I think, there are so many different things that congregations can do, and we could have a whole other webinar on what congregations can do. So I'm going to try to not get too sidetracked there. Yes, definitely do OWL. I'm going to also encourage you to do more than one thing in these times, if you are able to. Not saying that you need to do everything, But if you already have OWL, don't stop there. We need you. We need you in so many different ways. And we are going to have more information about what exactly you can do and different ways that we can support you in thinking through how you can use your resources as congregations. So stay tuned for that on the UUA end of things. But I want you to know that you aren't alone in as congregations trying to figure out where you can go from here, what that can look like. And I know there are a lot of OWL facilitators here in the room, and I just want to say to y'all, like, you have a lot of power in this situation, even though I know you may not feel like that sometimes in the moment, especially when these programs are under more scrutiny. But OWL as a program has been around for so long and has so much respect that it's one of our most established programs, right? And it's one of our most established trans affirming programs. And yeah, I mean, that's been a little complicated sometimes, full transparency, how OWL has related to trans folks. But still, like, that's the general vibe, like that's the hope and the goal of the program. And there's been a lot of change towards being more trans affirming and inclusive in the process over many different years. So I want to say that, like, your voice in your congregation matters because folks already respect and know OWL, and they're like, oh yeah, that's the cool thing that we do, right? That's our church's sex ed program. Like, we're so cool that we do sex ed at church, right? Like, there's a whole culture of support around OWL, right? And as OWL facilitators, you can get plugged in with me and Ashley and with our colleagues at UCC as well, and find ways to capitalize on that, right? Because folks are less aware and less sure of how to answer all these questions and all these challenges to trans rights in these moments, because the laws that the right has chosen and tested, of course, over the past decade to find the ones that are the weakest point on our end of things. People don't understand these issues that well, right? People don't understand much about the details of trans youth accessing healthcare. And there are a lot of folks that are on the progressive side in our congregations that maybe support trans rights in general, but don't actually understand why they would support this particular thing, right? The right has picked points where a lot of folks on the left don't actually even support it necessarily, and are having a really steep learning curve right now of understanding why and what these issues are, and hopefully moving towards supporting those things. And in those moments, I'm not saying that y'all need to suddenly be an expert in these issues either, but I think that there's space for y'all to be educators of your congregations, in addition to the youth. And we can provide support and resources for how that is and what that looks like, because you are already respected, even if it doesn't always feel like that. I know that, like, being an OWL facilitator can be a whole time in a congregation, but you have a role and it can be really powerful. So that's one thing that I want to share. I also want to share just a little bit of inspiration of cool things that congregations that I know of that are doing across the country. I'm not going to name them specifically here because I didn't get permission, and I want to make sure that they're okay with that first. But one thing you can do as congregations is think about, like, what are you already good at? And how can you use what you're already good at or already doing in service of supporting trans and non-binary folks and LGBTQA community in general right now? One congregation that I know of recently did a fundraiser for their coming 23 to 24 church year, where they're going to turn their building into a virtual school space for trans and non-binary youth and friends. And they are training adults in how to be safe, like safely supervising that space. And everybody who wants to from grades 1 through 12 can just come and be in community together. There'll be some community activities and extracurriculars happening. And trans and non-binary youth who've already maybe been pushed out of school, who haven't been going to school in person because of the pandemic, now have a space to be in community, and their parents have the capacity to not always be there during the school day, so they can maybe get another job to pay for care that's now less accessible, or that kind of thing. So there's a lot of really creative ways that you can make a huge difference in your community. Maybe you're not going to create a virtual school space, right? But that's an example of what one congregation did in a lot of discernment about what makes sense for them. And all of us have that bit of extra whatever that is, that we can bring to this space in our communities right now.
Thank you, Adrian. There was a question about somebody looking for resources for elders who didn't understand the language or the science or so one of the things that you can do is offer OWL for older adults. There's a workshop called Family Matters, which is about fostering communication between grandparents, their children, their grandchildren. There is information about gender identity. So, that the reason this whole program is called Our Whole Lives is because we don't stop learning about our sexuality when we turn 18. There is always more to learn, whether it's about ourselves or the people that we love or the people in the larger community. So really, take advantage of these opportunities to continue to learn. Also, Amy and I have put together curated resources on the resource pages of the UCC OWL program and the UUAL program. So, and we continue to add to that. So there are resources available for continued learning, including all of those that will be in the follow-up newsletter to this webinar. Just keep learning. And, if there are specific questions that you have, you can certainly reach out to the folks here on the panel. You can also refer to me and Amy because we might have, if we don't have the expertise ourselves, we can help you connect with the people who do, or books to read, or websites to visit. So we're here to support everybody in the OWL community in their continued learning and teaching.
Yeah, and I just want to tag on so many things that have been lifted up today. I do want to just name that those of us in leadership, especially I know Yadi and Rachael, my siblings and co-conspirators in this work, are aware that there is a particular place where the Christian church has caused harm around these issues and continues to, and that we are committed to being a voice of faith and support. And we know that. And so like when Yadi was talking about not just dropping the faith component, but being able to find a way to be a healing faith voice, that's really important. And that is something that we are working on, because we know, as Rachael had said, and many of others of you, Adrian and Yadi and Ashley and Melanie, if we've all lifted up in one way or another today, that shame and stigma are deadly. They are deadly. And so when we as faith communities are able to counter that with a voice of not only acceptance, but celebration and joyous, sacred loving of our bodies and the many ways that we are in relationship with each other, that is countercultural, it is transformational, it is ministry, it is all of those good things. And while, Our Whole Lives is something that can give you, it's a specific particular program with leader guides that tell you what to say and how to do things. And it can be a way into conversations about these topics in your congregations and your communities. So, and it is an investment. We know that. And we want you to be able to do that. So if you are in need of support in getting programs started or continuing them, please do reach out to Melanie and myself. The other thing I want to just share is that, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, but also on topic. So my local church has rainbow doors, and I know lots of churches have rainbow doors, and especially in the UCC, it's sort of become a thing. And so they're different rainbow colors, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and they say God's doors are open to all. So there's one word on each one of the doors. And we've had them for a few years, and when we first put them up, of course, they maybe made it 6 months or so before getting vandalized, because that's what happens, right? So the group in our community that responded to that was the local Pride community. And they got together, and they are people that don't go to our church. And they said, and we're not going to come to your church. We're not Christian, but we love your doors, and your doors are important to this community. And so they went to a local hardware store chain. They got doors donated. They got a work group together and came out and repainted them. They're even more beautiful. They came to the dedication. They testified. I'll use my Christian language. They testified to the importance of those doors in our community. And so I say that because, as you were saying, Adrian, like you might not think that you have a lot of power or that your voice is very, is being heard, but every small and large action that we take individually or as individual congregations ripples out to our communities in many, many ways that we may or may not see or be aware of, or we only become aware of it under certain circumstances. So I say that hopefully as a message of hope, as a message of hang in there, as a message of keep doing what you're doing. It is really, really, really important work, this Our Whole Lives work and this ministry. And even if the thing that you can do is have a conversation with your church leadership about, hey, I want to look at how we can offer something about Our Whole Lives. Hey, we want to get someone to go to, two people to go to a training. We want to continue to have conversations about this. We want to run the free parents and caregivers as sexuality educators small group ministry program. That is something. Please do something, even though you can't do everything. All right, I'm done. Thank you, Kelly. I'm done preaching. Who else has
I
something?
think Ashley, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Oh, yeah,
If
Ashley,
you wanted to
please,
jump
yes.
back in.
Yeah, I love this question about how OWL intersects with the justice work. So first of all, I have so many threads. I'm going to try and do them quickly. Number one, fascism depends on us being so scared that we police ourselves. Fascism is a very small number of people who convince the rest of the people that there is so much danger that we will not step out of line and that we need to police each other. And so when, we have gotten many legitimate concerns from congregations about, are we going to be prosecuted for teaching OWL, whether it's because of the Don't Say Gay laws or because of the abortion stuff that's in these curricula. And my response to that is that, there's the legal side, there's also the moral side, and there's the side of witness, right? Our faith calls us to show up and to be brave in the face of all of the things that are coming at us that want us to be small, that want us to be scared, that want us to be isolated. And so there's incredible power in us saying, there may in fact be risk for us at some point. Maybe it's not now, but maybe it will come. And we are still going to do it, right? That's how we fight fascism. I will also say, number one, I'm going to testify my own personal testimony here. So I'm going to date myself too. I went through About Your Sexuality, the precursor to OWL, when I was in high school. I'm 41 years old. So it was a few years after I went through high school that the OWL curriculum came about. But I grew up UU and grew up going to Catholic school at the same time. And I will say that AYS saved my life. It absolutely did. And so when I was 27 and met and fell in love with an older Black, butch, non-binary, trans person for the first time after dating cis guys my whole life, I was like, okay, cool. No big deal. We're all good. And like the life that I live in so many ways was made possible because I was taught then about the incredible richness and joy of gender and sexuality in the world, right? I now have a child who just went through OWL for the first time when she was in first grade last year, who is, she's got a mama and a mops and is a biracial little queer kid running around Minneapolis, and who also is able to show up in her community, which includes people who do not understand what her family looks like and who are not always affirming. And she's able to be like, yeah, cool. I have all of the language I need to talk about my own body, my own sexuality, consent, my family, all of these things. And seeing that in my family over the course of 2 generations is transformative. So when I hear our congregations talking about, being the only progressive congregation for 100 miles around, and that trans and queer families are flooding into our congregations, not necessarily because they're looking for a religious experience, but because they are looking for relationship and community. one of the greatest acts of radical hospitality that we can offer them is this curriculum, right? It's this offering of like, this is deeply what we believe about our bodies, about our relationships, about our families, about our belovedness. Here, welcome. Let us tell you who we are and you can believe us. And so we are providing sanctuary. We are in fact shifting culture when we invite people into this curriculum. My people, Unitarian Universalists, tend to be a little religiously wounded often when they come into the faith, and sometimes they're a little bit skittish about evangelism. But like, if we're gonna go evangelize, like, OWL is the way to do it, y'all. It is evangelism in and of itself, because it is such a clear declaration of what we believe. I will also say that using as an organizer, OWL is an incredible power building, relationship building tool. When we open the doors of our congregation, we might have made mistakes with the Immigration Coalition. Our people might be largely white and a little bit nervous about interacting with whoever's out in the community because they're not through their own liberal guilt stuff. But like, whoo, when we bring OWL into the picture and we're saying, come on in, this is what's going to bring us together. We're going to start building relationships in this way. It doesn't have to be, as Amy said earlier, but you're not necessarily going to stay and come to a Sunday worship service, but this is where we're sharing values. This is where we're building deep relationship that then turns into how we organize the direct action. It's how we interrupt the school board meeting. It's how we show up to the Proud Boys who are going to crash the Pride March together, because we have those relationships pre-existing. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now, but I believe that OWL is one of our greatest tools for combating fascism, for building power, and for saving lives.
Amen. And may it be so, and all of those things. We asked a few preachers on here this morning, and we got some word. We got some word. Are there, as we're wrapping, oh my gosh, y'all, I'm just so moved. I'm so moved. As we're getting to the top of the hour, I thank Adrian and everybody who's putting some things in the chat, and we will capture that chat and get those resources in the follow-up email. And if you were like, no, I'm not going to get extra emails from the UCC, like, that's okay, we got you. I'm going to give this information to you verbally. If you are watching this afterwards, hopefully you will see it too. So if you are wanting to get the resources and you don't get the follow-up letter, you can email me. That's fine. You can also go to the playlist page, and I'm hoping Laura can drop that link right into the chat now, the link for the playlist. So we have all of our Whole Lives Taking Flight webinars that are recorded and on this YouTube playlist page. Thank you so much, Laura. And that page, if you click on this webinar when it's up, which will be a little bit later this week or early next week, underneath if you click on this one, then the screen will come up, and underneath it, it'll show how many views, and there'll be a little button that says show more. And if you click on that show more, then it'll populate with all the resources and links that we have for you. That's true of any of them. So if you're like, how do I find all those mental health resources y'all talked about last month? Same thing, go there, click on the mental health webinar and click the show more that's underneath how many views there are right underneath the screen, and it'll populate. So I hope that's helpful to you all. And we are taking the rest of the summer off of webinars. So we will not have one in July or August, but we will be back. And again, by we, I mean Melanie will be back with you in September for a webinar about the importance of parent orientation for our youth and young people our whole lives.
And I would like to put in a pitch. We are looking for sites to field test the second edition of the Young Adult OWL curriculum. We will have those materials available in July, and we will be posting the applications shortly in as many places as we can. But if you really want to get in on the ground floor and contact me early, you're welcome to email me at owl@uua.org and say, sign me up for the young adult field test. We're going to have 14 workshops, and we just need you to commit to at least 7. Of course, you're welcome to do as many more as you please.
Adrian, you wanted a final word.
Yes, I just wanted to mention a few quick things. I put this in the chat, but wanted to make sure it was on the call as well for folks that are watching this later. Another piece of important work for us is making sure that our congregations are places that trans and non-binary people can thrive. A 2019 Trust report showed that only 28% of trans and non-binary people feel fully included in UU congregations, 28%. I linked the report in the chat and it'll be in the resources. I'm sharing this not to discourage us or to shame us, but I want to encourage us to examine how we can show up for our beloveds, because it matters. It matters how we do. The resource link that I shared above and I also put in the chat includes ways for us to think through how to be more welcoming. There are checklists, there are deep questions you can ask your congregations, and there are us at the UUA, and I imagine there are folks at UCC who are there to support you through thinking through that as well. There can be a gap between the reality of what things look like on the ground for folks when they come into our spaces and what our stated values are, and we can work to fill that gap. There is space for us to do that. Our program, the 5 Practices of Welcome Renewal, is one place to go for working on that. And also a really great program that's not a UUA or UCC program, but I recommend checking out, is the organization Transforming Hearts Collective. They offer amazing training programs. I don't believe they're UU specific, but they are faith-based. It is a UU-led organization. They have a video series that works on not a trans 101 level, but going kind of deeper into how to be trans inclusive and what that looks like. They're working on additional programming right now that's for these times. So please follow them, check them out, and check out their training if it feels like it works for you. I really appreciate y'all thinking about that. I wanted to make sure that got into the recording in case that's useful for anyone.
Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. And also Rachel and I simultaneously, though their link is the correct one, put in the chat the Open and Affirming Coalition for the United Church of Christ, which has information about trans and non-binary resources and also a process for becoming an open and affirming congregation in the United Church of Christ, which we have right now. 33% of our churches are officially open and affirming. There are others, many more that have welcoming practices, but to your point, Adrian, it matters. It matters that we have these conversations. It matters all the work that each and every one of us is doing. You matter. You are beloved. You are sacred. You are created to be all of who you are in this world. So thank you so much for being with us today, and bless you. Bless you on your journey.
And thank you to all of our guests and to all of our viewers and listeners. See you in September.